Hello and welcome again to another episode of SacTown Talks. Today we're glad to be joined again by Chris Micheli. Chris, how's it going? Thanks for joining us again.
Good. How are you doing today?
Good.
On a beautiful sunny day in Sacramento.
A rare sunny day here in the spring.
Before we get another winter storm.
Exactly. But I guess we're full of water now. So
exactly.
Hopefully you can stay
Are
that
we
way.
Storing it well? I don't know.
Yeah.
No.
Questions for tomorrow.
Okay.
We'll see. So,
or a water law expert for you.
Exactly. We'll get Alex on again.
Yeah.
So you've gone and done it, huh? You've written another book.
A handful of them, yes.
a stack.
Plus, in another month or so, the second and revised and expanded lobbying manual that you also participated in will hopefully be published. We're hoping to get some of the page proof soon.
That's exciting.
But yeah, as you know, over the years, I've done a number of case books and big textbooks, and a lot of folks said, I don't need all that information, or that's for law students or college students. You ought to make some practical things. So I gave it a lot of thought, and over the fall recess and particularly the Christmas holidays, what did I do? I spent my time putting together some practical guides on a number of different topics. So yeah.
That's fascinating.
But they're supposed to be shorter versions. They're more in a question and answer format, an FAQ. And so hopefully it gives folks enough to have a pretty good understanding of from lobbying to election laws and state government and the legislative process, et cetera.
Have you ran into anyone in the swing space with one of your books yet? Just going through it?
Oh my gosh. A lot of people I've signed, this year I've signed more than I have in the past from both members and staff. But yeah, there's a lot of people who have stopped me and said this was very helpful, or YouTube videos or other things. So as long as it's helpful, as you know, I love the institution and the process. And so anything that I can do to help people in their understanding, I enjoy doing. Right. So it's from the heart, really. It's, a lot of I always like to point out that funds and stuff go to the Capital Fellows program. These are not best-selling books by any means, but they go for a good cause. So yeah.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you've had some changes here. You've moved offices, kind of started a new firm.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. I went back to being a solo practitioner, as I have been in the past. I've experienced being a solo practitioner, one partner, 2 partners, and 12 partners. So that's I've sort of run the gamut, and so it's nice. The best part is being here in the Senator Hotel. I'm subleasing office space from one of my clients, Sherm, and now I have just a short walk to the Capitol building as well as to the swing space. So I'm definitely enjoying that.
Yeah, it's interesting, kind of with all these issues with downtown and office space. The center is just packed.
It absolutely is, and nothing's changed from the Hyatt. I used to park there. Ironically, my first lobby job and my third lobby job were in this building. Of course, that's when prior to it being renovated, shall we say.
Right.
Yeah. So it's really nice now, and the convenience can't be beaten.
Right.
Yeah. A client asked last month, so how are you enjoying the new space? And I said, well, I pulled into the Hyatt garage at 7:58, and I walked downstairs to Cafe A Cote for an 8 o'clock breakfast.
Right.
When that finished at 8:30, I walked to a fundraiser at Michelii. And then when I finished there at 9, I walked across the street into my office building. I said, so yeah, it's working out pretty well.
Yeah, it took all 100
I'm
steps.
enjoying exactly, right? Yes.
That's amazing. So we're in a second year of a 2-year session, kind of a weird year with this early primary.
People, those 4 years go by slowly, I guess, and we forget what the impact is. I think the number one thing was, why aren't there hearings going on or things happening? It's like, members are campaigning.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually March and right before the spring recess is like your busy time.
Absolutely.
And this early primary totally changes everything.
Yeah. And then, as you know, that was the first week of March. The last week of March was spring break. And so now they've come back to do 4 weeks of hearing I don't know, 1,800 bills
Right.
over a 4-week period, get them through their first policy committees. Yeah.
So, kind of what are some of the stuff you're working on, some of the stuff you're seeing right now?
Well, certainly AI is a popular topic,
Mhm.
right? Well, my practice is primarily for the business community. So whether it's environmental regulation, labor and employment, judiciary issues, et cetera, that's where I spend, a fair amount of time. But um, do transportation and insurance, and I always enjoy my practice because I call it a hodgepodge.
Right.
I try not to specialize too much in particular areas,
Mhm.
and enjoy being in different committees and with different colleagues in different subject areas. So, but there are a lot of hot topics these days. Of course, we just finished the early budget action, and more to come with the May revise soon.
Yeah, that should be really interesting because
Yeah.
big gap to fill, and
Yeah.
should be it's amazing. I think I saw when Gavin Newsom took over, the budget was 199 million
Billion.
billion
Yeah.
billion,
Yeah.
sorry, and now
Yeah.
it's
Just over
almost
300.
almost double that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's grown. Well, when I started lobbying, with your dad a long time ago, it was in the, 60-70 billion-dollar range, and that was still pretty big.
Right.
Well, I mean, when the budget under Pete Wilson was a $15 billion deficit, right? And he closed the gap half in tax increases and half in cuts. That was like, I don't know, a third of the budget or something like that. I mean, it was, so it's, grown quite considerably, billions every single year. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is
In
amazing.
a short
Yeah.
span of time.
Yep.
And kind of, we just recently had like Probolsky on, and we were talking about
Mhm.
polling and kind of mood,
Yeah.
and a lot of unhappy, I guess, voters out there, kind of wondering where's all this money going. You had the homelessness.
I don't know about you.
Audit.
I don't know about you, but the most common question I get from family or friends
Mhm.
is, how did we go from a $97 billion surplus to a, 40 to 70 billion-dollar deficit? And you always have to explain that these are multi-year and they're estimates, but that is the most common
Right.
question. They think that the legislature and governor have spent the $100 billion surplus, which we never actually had.
Exactly.
But yes, yeah.
Yeah, something about the stock market. People exercising options
And our
something like that.
progressive tax system, yeah.
Exactly.
But homelessness is definitely number one. What did we get for the 12 plus billion we've spent? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is an issue that I've heard more from, again, family and friends than anything. Where has the money gone?
Mhm.
And why haven't things gotten better, et cetera? Yeah.
Right. No, it's going to be a
Unfortunately.
fascinating turn as we look into the budget. What's more to come here into November? It's going to be definitely an interesting year.
Oh, yeah.
But you have this pile of books beside you here. So how many books have you written here now?
Well,
Let's see 'em all.
there are 10 practical guides. This was the first one on state government generally.
Mhm.
I have a lengthy textbook on California state government, the 3 branches and all of that. And so tried to put something together again in a FAQ type format, for people to get a understanding of government generally in California. And then went on to some other ones, and you can see there, that's a bigger one, but most of them are relatively small, 70, 80 pages at most. But I did one on legislative drafting and statutory interpretation.
Oh,
I think,
nice.
as you know, a colleague of mine, Jessica Gosney, who's a deputy in Legislative Counsel Bureau, she
Mhm.
and I have co-taught now 3 years, heading
Yeah.
into our 4th year at Davis, the only course at a California law school on legislative drafting. And so did a
I've
short
actually
version there.
I used this recently.
Oh, really?
We
Oh,
had a
good.
question about retroactivity.
There you
And I had a
go.
client.
And you found the
who
answer?
was just like, that just can't be constitutional. It doesn't make sense. And I was like, it is. Look, here it is. I was like, where's that Micheli
Love it,
article I
yes.
can find?
This one's on political and election laws. This is where I first started my
yeah.
legal practice, but this was the last case book, and I swear it is the last case book, but it's just over 1,000 pages
Oh, wow.
on California political and election laws. And, obviously that's a tomb like this big.
Right.
No one's practitioners, yes, or in a law school class, yes, but the average individual, no. This is a short version of a lobbying guide. I always get questions about the budget process. So did one on the budget process
mystery,
and the legislative process. And then, I've spent over the years a lot of time in the regulatory world. So I did one on the regulatory process, and I've taught for, Ray LeBove.
Yep.
Yeah. So Ray's had me since 2015 or 16 teach a 2-hour seminar on the regulatory process and regulatory advocacy. And so I took notes and other stuff from that and turned it into, a short book. This is a thicker one, but this a lot of people have utilized because this outlines all of the regulations, all of the constitutional provisions, and the 29 codes in one handy area. And so a good reference thing. As you know, being the legislative geek I am, I've been tracking a lot of legislative data over the years, like number of bill introductions,
it's like a math book.
The number of bill. Yeah, there are lots of charts and things like that. But everything from bill intros and vetoes and signing messages, and I wanted to sort of compile everything because over the years, like all the signing messages over the last 20 years, I've sort of compiled in one place. Things like letters to the journal. Well, probably the last 12, 15 years that I've been sort of a data geek on the legislative, side.
What does the data tell you? All that.
What does it tell me? Well, there's so much disparate stuff. It's not all cohesive in one topic. Yes, it deals with the legislature and the legislative process, but introductions, gubernatorial. I guess the things that jump out at me with introductions, things are relatively consistent since we've had bill limits. Second year, just like this year, the number of bill introductions is always lower than the first year introductions. I thought the interesting thing was, as I started looking back over the last few years in terms of bill introductions and statutory amendments per code, right? The 29 codes, like evidence, civil code, government code, they're pretty consistent over the years, which is strange to me. You get over 2,000 bill introductions every year, and yet there's always like, I don't remember the exact number, but like every year there's 80 to 85 bills affecting the rev and tax code or something.
Oh, interesting.
And it's like, really? After, that seemed a little strange to me. The letters to the journal, there's nothing, because I've done a lot of legal research and statutory research over the years, and you never even knew, was there a letter to the journal unless you had access to like, West or Deering codes, right? Or now today, Lexis, Westlaw type stuff to find out, for example, was there a statement of legislative intent or not? And so I tried to go back again the last 15 plus years and compile, going through all the daily journals over the years, and spent time at the state law library for many days, compiling them all in one place. So if you ever want to look back over the last 15 or so years, you can see all the letters to the Assembly and Senate daily journals in case you're doing legislative research, for example.
It's interesting. I don't know. Did you catch this Cal Matters article the other day about the not voting? And they were tracking all the members who have never cast a no vote.
Yeah.
Is that any of the data you
That was surprising. No, because I don't really look at voting. I haven't compiled voting. Thank God. There, as you know, there are 4,000 or 5,000 votes a year, right, between the committee. But maybe this digital democracy program that Cal Matters is doing. I don't know. Did you ever see the data that originally former Senator Sam Blakesley had put together?
That was cool when they had all the
they've
committee hearings on video, and you could look yourself up.
So they've built off of that. And so now if you go to Cal Matters, it's called their Digital Democracy Project.
Have you typed your name in? Look it in.
Well, Dave Lesher, the editor, showed me it, and it's towards the end of right before it was going to go live. And so we looked through some things, and we looked at, like by subject matter, a few of the legislators, so you could pull up Assembly Member X or Senator Y and their bills. And yeah, you can pull testimony out. You can, they try to connect dots, if you will, between contributions and legislative activity and all that kind of stuff. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
So
it always seems to me like, man, what an undertaking, all this work to do. Kind of what got you started?
It's a labor of love.
Yeah. What got you started in writing in the first place?
Well, I've always been a writer. One of my best friends in grammar school and even today, Rob Turner, he and his wife, Alyssa Lee, are the co-publishers and co-editors of SacTown magazine. Mm-hmm. And Rob and I were actually editors of our high school paper. We both went to Jesuit High School in Sacramento.
The Plank, huh?
The Jesuit High School Plank. We were co-editors, and I wrote in college for UC Davis Aggie, and so I've always been a writer and a reader. Of course, like Rob pursued it professionally. I haven't. My day job remains as a lobbyist, but over the years, I guess it started more with maybe advocacy on behalf of client issues, like op-eds and those things. Mm-hmm. But then as I really became a student of the process and the legislature, I started writing about interesting topics. And honestly, over the years, I've gotten a lot of folks who have given suggestions. People stop me in the hallway or email and say, hey, have you written about this, or can you cover this? And so that's given me ideas. And an old friend and colleague, Jeannie Kane, who used to be the chief lobbyist at Cal Chamber, one day about 7 or 8 years ago said, you should really combine all these and write a book on the process. And honestly, if somebody else had done it, I would never have. But the fact that it hadn't been done yet, I thought, why not? It's sort of like the California lobbying book, like I remember in having early discussions with Ray LeBeau, I said, what kind of lobbying books do you have? So he gave me a stack of them, half a foot high. And there were some interesting tidbits, but they were all federal government. Mm-hmm. I said, is there anything at the state level? He said, no. I said, oh, well, maybe we should set about doing it. And that's what we ended up doing with the first iteration. And now with the second edition is soliciting our colleagues,
It always seems like such an undertaking. You open your computer, you got that blank screen staring back at you, and you kind of got to figure out where to start. Kind of, how do you work through the process of organizing what you're going to write and actually fill up all these pages?
My as my wife likes to say, my brain doesn't shut off. I'll be walking the dog in the shower, driving to work, driving home, and I'll think, oh, what about this or what about that? I'm always thinking. It's one of the things that I don't know how you feel. It's one of the things I love about this job. Even when you have a repeat of the same bill, a second year in a row, or maybe it was 3 years ago, players have changed. Maybe some of the arguments, the process may change. You may face a different hurdle this year than you did 3 years ago. To me, it's always intellectually challenging and stimulating because there's so much going on.
Yeah, you have an issue and the arguments evolve because your opposition comes up with new arguments.
Yes, the proponents do, you do, absolutely.
And there's just like this back and forth that just like never ends on some of these issues, right?
Yeah. So your question, it's never, for whatever reason, it's not a blank screen. It's just like, it just comes flowing out. And, so, but hey, to be fair, as you know, most of them are pretty short blurbs. Sure, the books end up being lengthy, but I've always written like short chapters and things so that it's more digestible to people. And that's actually why with this batch of the practical guides, as I call them, I've done the FAQ approach because I thought, maybe than just reading dry info, that maybe doing it in a question and answer format, it may be something that might be more easily comprehensible or digestible to readers. Yeah.
Out of all the books you've written, do you have a favorite?
Favorite? Well, honestly, I think the lobbying manuals, only because I've been able to collaborate with colleagues, and that's been fun. Doing it by yourself. The case books have been the hardest. Those are just massive undertakings. Well, as you can imagine, whether it's political and election law or the regulatory process, there are just hundreds of cases, and you just think, what am I going to do? It's like the single subject rule.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's got to be more than 200 reported cases. And you think, which ones do you use? So
find the one with the best pack pattern, right?
yeah, well, that's the thing that you got to look at. Does it like describe the law in detail? Is it well written? There's some cases out there that are not good explainers, or their analyses is kind of lacking or stuff. So you're trying to think about it like, how does somebody learn, to do an analysis and read it and at the same time be educated about the topic?
Right.
So you're reading just dozens and dozens of cases. That one works. That one doesn't. Oh, this one's better than that one. I'll substitute that one out. I mean, it takes forever to do it. That's why I'm not doing casebooks anymore.
You're sworn off.
No, God, they're terrible. Yeah.
So, earlier we were talking about issues in the legislature, and you brought up, AI as a hot topic.
Yeah.
Are you using AI at all to help you write these,
not
or
at all.
jog ideas?
I
or
wouldn't
anything?
even have the foggiest idea how to do it. No. That's okay. The other month I was accused of having a bot. I said, I don't even know how to set one up, let alone use one. No, it's me who sends out the emails
Micheli bot.
Yeah, I don't. Yes, I don't even know how to create one. Yeah, exactly.
That's
no,
funny.
not yet. And I haven't. I guess I don't know that I've come across any student work so far in either law school that have used AI. I don't know. Maybe they have, and we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So you're teaching as well, right?
Yeah, in the fall.
Semester? In the fall. Okay,
In the
fall only.
Yeah.
Can you talk about kind of some of the classes you're working on right now?
Well, the only two that I teach, although again I have ideas for all different types of ones.
Yeah.
At McGeorge, it's always been the lawmaking in California, which is great because obviously I live the topic day in and day out in my day job. But as you know, we're right here by the state capitol, so we're really fortunate to have great guest speakers in there. For example, we have both the chief clerk of the Assembly, Sue Parker, and the Secretary of the Senate, Erica Contreras, talk, and we have the governor's ledge secretary, talk about the administration and how they review bills, et cetera, things like that. And then the course that we put together for legislative drafting, as I said, I really enjoy that quite a bit as well, because all 14 weeks of the semester, students are drafting different parts of a bill. They also draft, 1 week a resolution and one a constitutional amendment. But the bulk of the semester, of course, is on bills. And several of these students have gotten externships at the Office of Legislative Counsel, and so that's exciting. But I have ideas about other topics.
Yeah, like what? Let's hear it.
Well, all the things that I enjoy. I'd love to see California, law school class on the rulemaking process. A lot of schools, I took administrative law at McGeorge when I went, but it was all about the federal APA, so I'd like to see something focused at the state level. I've designed a course on the legislative process from a law school point of view. In other words, this is one of the 5 case books, but it's the first half is on the legislature as an institution. Everything from judging who is a member, right? To the second half of the book is on the legislative process and all the cases dealing with the legislative process. So I still want to teach a true law school class on the legislature and the legislative process, among other things. Yeah.
As someone who's kind of been around and has seen the process has always been the same, pretty much. It's kind of set in stone.
Sometimes we have, ad hoc things like the Assembly's use of batching of bills, akin to the special consent calendar in the state Senate. But yes, otherwise it's pretty much the same. I always talk with students about, things like, why do they have why do they do 3 readings of a bill when it's on the internet and you can Google bills and find them and all of that? Well, because the Constitution requires it, type thing.
It's funny. So you have like the Assembly rules, you have the Senate rules, you have the joint rules.
Yes.
And then, it's kind of like, what's the recourse if they don't follow the rules?
Well, that's the most interesting, or sorry, not the most interesting. It's definitely interesting to me because I think in the end, there isn't a lot of recourse, to be fair, only because the courts have always given the legislative branch of government a lot of deference in lawmaking. So, if they, don't give the 4-day file notice, does that make a law invalid? Heck no.
Yeah.
You
Or
know?
was it the rule? Was it like Rule 72 germaneness or something like that?
Yes.
That used to be like a big
It
thing.
used to be, but
And-
it's not enforced. Well, that's a story I tell students and colleagues. Dotson Wilson, the Sue Parker's predecessor, and he was always generous with his time with me. I could always walk in and ask questions. And I always remember a very, very early time as a lobbyist. And I walked into the, chief clerk's office and I said, I'd like to see the chief clerk, please. So he came out and I said, so this bill, whatever it was, AB 123, look, it's amendments to the education code, and they stripped it all out. And now it's the streets and highways code. And he said, and I said, clearly they're not germane. And he said, Chris, germaneness is up to 41 members. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, if 41 members on the assembly say that those transportation amendments are germane to the education code, then they're germane. And I said, understood, Mr. Wilson. Thank you. Yeah. But remember Newt Russell, he used to stand up on the Senate floor and raise their germaneness issue, but his colleagues didn't really care. They said, thank you very much, Senator, and went on and considered the bill.
Move our time along.
Yes. But that always, comes from, gut and amend bills. And that's always like the fun topic, especially since it sounds so evil, the press, when they write about it, or the public, what is this gut and amend?
Right.
It's not that big of a deal, folks. And now on the internet, you can find these things easily, and they make it pretty easy. I mean, come on, Legislative Council publishes on the internet. It's like blue italics is new and red strikeout we're getting rid of. It
was funny. I was talking, you have all these technology companies who wanted to get into bill tracking.
Sure.
So I was talking to one, and something that's very common here is you get a lot of kind of gut and amended bills, right?
Sure.
Like people have an old bill that's moved through the process, and they don't want to do that anymore. They want to do something new throughout the year, not just the end of the year, throughout the year.
Yeah.
So you get this kind of like this daily gut and amend report.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, is that something your service does? And they're like, oh, no, that's not really an issue in other states. And you're like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and here it is. Yeah. Yes. Well, I always remember, and I must say, one of them was your dad. When I used to do harness racing, we worked out a bill, and I remember all summer he told me, we'll get into the bill. We'll get into the bill. Don't worry. There was like less than 2 weeks left in the legislative session that year, and I ran into him. I said, what's going on? What's going on? And he said, don't worry. And sure enough, a few days later, it finally came into print.
He had this great art of taking like a spot bill and just like adding sentences on it. And then so it'd be like, 80% there. And then the last week you'd put the final 20%.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. That was fun. I learned a lot from, folks like himself and, a lot of the folks who were old timers when I started. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, different times.
Oh, different time.
No 3-day rule, no fax machine, no.
Well, I don't know about you, but I used to stand, on the old third floor of the annex. I used to stand kind of in the middle because then I could see folks coming and going Senate side assembly, but also who was going in and out of Legislative Council office.
Oh.
Because as they would announce Assembly Rules Committee members go to the Assembly Rules Committee, and everybody would run over to see what bill are they going to concoct today.
Yeah.
You had to pay attention. That's that clearly is like the biggest change in the process in 40 years, right? Now in the last 3 days of session, exactly what's out there. There's no surprises. There's no new bills coming.
Right.
But you literally always had to stay, whether it was 2 a.m, 5 a.m, you had to stay until the bitter end because they could pull bills out and ram them through the process in a couple of hours. Yeah.
It's always funny, like, clients are like, what's the timeline on this? And you're always like, well, technically it's this, but then it could be that. And like, really the answer is just all year. Yeah.
Right, all year. Right, until they adjourn.
Right.
That's so true. Well, I remember a couple years ago, someone, a client, I had sent them, the calendar of deadlines, right? And I talked about the second bill introduction deadline. So they get an email from a client, and he's like, I'm looking at the calendar that you have, and whatever the date was, in late February, and there's just one deadline for introducing bills, and you're talking about some mid-March. And I said, oh yeah, that's not in the rules. That's just the rules committee say this is when you have to have spot bill amendments in. So I call it the second deadline, because that's when you find out, what a lot of these bills are going to turn into. And they said, well, how can they do that? It's not in the rules, So
41 people. Well,
some things aren't in there. They're just determinations by the rules committee.
If they consider it a spot bill. Like,
Anyways, I mean, but I think that's part of the, what makes it interesting and always challenging, I mean, I always like to say, if every bill were on consent, we wouldn't have a roll, So I mean, I like those types of things. And I also always say, I don't know how you feel, but we all rail against like gut and amends until you need one.
Right.
And then you're like, thank God they have this process. It's sort of like trailer bills. When you're fighting something in a trailer bill, it's terrible. It's an uphill battle. You rarely win. But God, when you get something in a trailer bill, you're like, this is great.
Yeah. Or like this whole problem now, they have like, they put in that like energy, you have to pay for like, how much you make. It's like income based. And everyone's like, we had no idea.
We had no idea. Y'all vote for it. Yeah, exactly. It was in the analyses, but oh well. Yeah. That
so funny.
20 other provisions. Right. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But it's just the processes, and like, even when a bill dies, it can still be brought out at any time.
Well, I'm sure you say the same thing to clients, there are deadlines, but there are ways around them. And yes, nothing dies until they actually adjourn for the year. And then things really are. Yeah.
No, it's fascinating. So, you've always been a guy who's like been in the building, they're watching the action. Mm-hmm. But we all have, a lot more technology and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What is the value of always being there and kind of keeping a pulse of what you're seeing?
Well, whether it's running into fellow lobbyists or staff or members themselves, it's just, finding out information and hearing what's on the top of people's mind. And also it's an ability to exchange information. And sometimes it's, one of the things that I immediately missed during the COVID time was you could go up to get a drink or your sandwich at the 6th floor cafeteria, and there are members or staff, and you're like, oh, I needed to see so-and-so. And now I don't have to stop by the office because they're right there. And sometimes you run into your colleagues and you can share notes or anything else. So to me, it's a lot easier to have a pulse on what's going on when you run into people on a regular basis than being on the phone or by Zoom. So I never liked it, from day one of COVID. Sometimes you had to do it, but I go to the Capitol even with the limited interaction, because if you did have the chance, members and staff were still wanting to have those interactions too. And so for me, it's just the way I've always operated. And so it's the natural thing to do.
Yeah. So like, when we were in the Capitol, everything was pretty much in one spot. Now you have, hearings in the Capitol and floor sessions.
Terrible.
You have, the LOB, if you have an issue there. You have some members in there, some staff in there you have to go see. And then you have, the swing space.
Yep.
Kind of how are you adjusting to this kind of triple building?
It's rough certain days. And of course, if it's raining or 110, it's even more miserable. This is when I wish they had like an underground tunnel or something. Particularly because, as you know, you got to go through security in both places. I always want to say, nothing changed. I didn't put anything else into my bag or, and the lines sometimes, less so in the historic side, much more so at the swing space, the current annex, is just crazy sometimes. Earlier this week, I spent 25 minutes in line just to get in. And then of course hiked up 6 flights of stairs because there was no way I was going to wait in that line to get in the damn elevator.
They used to have the lobbyist card.
I know, but it depends. Well, first, I haven't renewed it in years.
Yeah,
I just, I don't.
You're going to cut people.
It's one, yes. Yeah. It's one thing for staff. I respect that. But, when there's 10 other lobbyists in line and I'd want to get in front of them, come on. Mm-hmm. I never used it that purpose. So that's why I've never renewed it in all these years. Because I've just never thought that I could actually pull it out and try to get it. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not comfortable in doing that. Sorry. Yeah. Right. I stand in line, but anyways, there have been, hey, I'll tell you, there were times like last year and the prior year where I actually stayed and ate lunch at the cafeteria on the 3rd floor because I thought there's no way I'm leaving and standing in a line for 30 minutes, So I just stayed in the building.
That's like the toughest thing when you have clients and it's lunchtime. And you have that issue, and there's really nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
It's gonna get
but the worst is when you have hearings between the 2 buildings. That's just miserable.
Yeah.
Well, you end up missing some things. Earlier this week, I had bills in 1 assembly committee and 2 Senate committees, and I stayed and did the Senate ones first. And then I was done in the swing space that morning, and then walked back across to the historic side and did those bills, and then. That's about all you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you have a project coming out, what, couple months maybe? Another book?
Well, that's, no, we're looking at page proofs later this month, early May. So hopefully by the end of May, the second revised California lobbying manual, we've almost doubled it in size, gotten lots of new authors to contribute new topics. It's funny because when Ray and I compiled the first one with 40 odd colleagues, we thought we've covered every topic possible. No, so there's lots of good stuff, obviously, including your chapter and others.
So how many more pages have you added since the first edition?
More than a 50% increase.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I don't even want to call it the second edition because I think it's
a new
much more expansive. Yeah, really. Seriously. It is. Yes, it has all the stuff from the first, but it's got so much more.
And so what do you think has led to when was the first one written? Not that long ago.
2020. Right? Well, I guess they were written in fall of 2019. It was published in January 2020. So it's,
the
4
world
years
changed.
ago.
Yeah.
It has. Although we ended up not doing anything related to COVID because obviously at this point that's done. But yeah, you could have written some stuff on COVID lobbying, but yeah.
The system, we said the rules are the same, things are the same. But when you go over there and you interact, it's different. It's different than it was in 2019. What are some of the most notable differences you notice?
Well, I think there's a lot more use of phone calls, but particularly Zoom or Teams or, and I think a lot of staff as well enjoy that sometimes, especially on Fridays. I know that they can't really work remotely right now, which is unfortunate. I think on Fridays they should be given that opportunity both in both houses, but I think that helps out. And as you know, with the current office space, it's pretty limited. So sometimes when you want, we used to jam 10 or 15 people into some of those offices in the old in the old annex. Today there just isn't the room. And instead of having it in the hallway or in the common space, especially when there's another 50 or 100 people out there, to get a bunch of people on Zoom, I think that's helped. I love the portal. I'm glad that I don't have to walk bill letters around anymore. That used to be several hours every week between the LOB and the, but we get plenty of them in today, but I think that's helpful in the ability for members and staff to pull that information readily off there, and they don't have to, build these big binders full of letters and support and opposition. So I think there have been some good aspects of, what transpired in 2020, 21, and a little into 2022. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're short on time here,
Sure,
but
sure.
thanks for joining us, and
Thanks.
we're looking
Always enjoy
forward to
talking.
the new edition coming out. And
Yeah.
if some of our listeners kind of want to find you on socials, kind of what's the best way to do that?
The at Chris Micheli Twitter X.
Yeah.
But for educational things, the Blogspot and the YouTube videos. And as I've said to you and others, if people come across topics that I haven't covered, let me know.
Yeah.
Love to do it. Because look, I've learned or been reminded of things quite a bit as I look back over things. Oh yeah, I forgot about that rule or something. So.
I highly recommend everyone follow Chris on X. Always informative. He always tweets out some good stuff, and look at his YouTube stuff. Definitely.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks
Thanks
so
for
much.
joining us, Chris.
Good to see you, sir.
Looking forward to your next second manual here.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks.